So I'd like to welcome you all. My name is Susan Ratcliffe and I'm the marshal. That means if we were standing in a field, I could keep you all in order. But since we aren't allowed to stand in a field, here we are on the Zoom screen. Our theme for 2Rivers this year is the confluence of the rivers, peoples, and stories. So hearing the stories tonight will be really a good part of our festival. So this is our 10th annual festival that celebrates and appreciates the speed in the Aramasa rivers. And we'd like to thank Protect Our Moraine for sharing their passion for our rivers and the waters that run underneath Guelph with you. And thank you all for attending the event. This festival is organized and run by volunteers and involves many community organizations. Please support those organizations that are doing all the work for the festival. And support our advertisers and our sponsors, CFRU, Mike Schreiner, who you'll hear from later, and Mickey Shepard, who made this event possible. You can see our advertisers on our website and in our booklets. The festival this year over May and June has over 40 great events. 40 events. That's just amazing. So that's all organized by different groups and RSVP to the ones that are of interest. So just mention a couple. Tomorrow night is Two Row on the Grand, put on by the First Nations group. Thursday night is Jeremy Shute talking about the next stretch of Speed to Sea. And I'll do a shameless self-promotion. Next Thursday, May 27th, Councillor Leanne Caron and I are doing a talk, and should have been a walk, but won't be, about Guelph's limestone and the quarries. I'd also like to let you know that we are recording these sessions. And so if you don't want to be on the recording, please close your video. Otherwise, they will be available on YouTube. You'll get a message afterwards about where they'll be available. So I just want to tell you just a little bit about Protect Our Moraine, the group that's sponsoring tonight, presenting. It's a coalition of Guelph and Wellington-based organizations that have come together to help reimagine development in the south end of Guelph, the last greenfield area of Guelph. And while we do have a diverse range of interests, we have a common desire to make sure that the land, the water, the wildlife, the cultural and natural heritage in the Clair-Maltby area are respected and preserved for today and for the future. So this evening, I would like to welcome Mike Schreiner, our MPP and leader of the Green Party, and Dominique O'Rourke, who is a city councillor for Ward 6, where Clair-Maltby is situated. And I'm going to turn the session over to Professor Brendan Stewart of the University of Guelph School of Landscape Architecture, and he will conduct the meeting. If you have questions, comments to share, please put them in the chat, and we'll do them at the end of this meeting. Thanks. Over to you, Brendan.
Great. Well, thank you, Susan, so much for that introduction and for helping to facilitate tonight. And thanks also to all of the organizers for tonight's event, particularly to Mike Marcolongo for reaching out to us and inviting us to take this on. It's a great honor and opportunity for the school and for the students. And thanks to MPP Mike Schreiner and Councillor Dominique O'Rourke for being here. It's really wonderful to have the opportunity to share some of this work. I'm just going to talk for 3 or 4 minutes at the beginning to sort of provide a bit of an overview of, I guess, the agenda for tonight. And then I'm going to turn it over, and we're going to have a few presentations from some of the students. So I guess what I would start by saying is that this opportunity arose through conversations actually with Mike and a few others from Protect Our Moraine and with the city, in fact, about figuring out how to maybe look at the Clair-Maltby lands as part of the community design studio that we run every fall semester in our BLA program, our Bachelor of Landscape Architecture program at the university. For those of you who don't know, we have this really amazing landscape architecture school in town. We have a master's program and we have an undergraduate program, and they're both professionally accredited. And it's in fact the only professionally accredited undergraduate program in the country. So it's kind of, it's a pretty big deal in terms of putting out wonderful professionals to make our world a better place every year. And we have 65 students typically in each year. And so the cohort that was working on this studio, they were the 4th year graduating class. And so we've got a few of the students that are going to present tonight. And I recognize some names and what I assume might be family from some of the students too, just looking at last names. So this is the graduating class that will be convocating in a month or two. And this is work that they did last fall during the pandemic. So it's exciting to sort of have this event as one of the things to sort of launch them out into the world. So we focus every year in community design on introducing the students to a whole bunch of topics, that are part of landscape architecture practice, but really overlap with other sort of disciplines like urban design, and we're introducing them to land use planning and environmental planning and a whole bunch of different things. And the thing that distinguishes this particular studio in their curriculum is the scale. We start to look at a really big area. And so the Clair-Maltby lands, and I know a lot of you will know a little bit about them. There's probably lots of people from the community here tonight. I'm gonna let the students sort of maybe show some maps to locate people, but essentially it's this, this large planning area in the south end of Guelph, about 400 hectares in total. And it's on the Paris-Galt Moraine, which is one of the major factors that we're having to grapple with. So it's a really significant landscape from a sort of groundwater infiltration perspective. It's a glacial landscape. And it also has a really unique hummocky sort of character. It's hilly. It's got this remarkable, it's subtle, but it's quite character defining, and something to really think about how to conserve that through the planned development that is forecasted over the coming decades. So this is an area that the city is developing a secondary plan for to imagine growth, really sort of context sensitive and progressive growth in this area with new transit and new employment and new housing and all kinds of things. So it was a great site for the students to work on. I just want to say a couple more things before turning it over to the students. So the process we had, during the semester, we had 12 weeks, we had 65 students all looking at this site during the pandemic. And this was at the beginning of the pandemic. So we were all kind of getting used to these new tools to collaborate remotely. And we did actually have the opportunity to do a site visit, however. And it was voluntary and it was available to the students who were in proximity to Guelph. But we had a beautiful day in September, and we spent quite a bit of time on the Marcolongo farm and sort of exploring. So we were sort of grounded in the land, not to the degree we like to be normally, but we really made do, I think, given the challenges. The other thing I would suggest is that, yeah, we had a lot of engagement with different community members and with city staff. We had the policy planner on the file involved, giving feedback throughout the process. We had professionals coming in from different disciplines. We had community members. My co-instructor for the class is here, Shirley Hall. Maybe you could just quickly wave, Shirley. So we did this together, and we had amazing TAs. The thing I would just say is that the work that you're going to see tonight is not like a fully fleshed out alternative to what the city has been planning. It's not a critique of the city's work. It's nothing like that at all. It's really about student learning, and hopefully an opportunity to have developed a few interesting kind of kernels of ideas that are just good to sort of put out there into the larger conversation. We're always trying to strike this balance, I think, in these studios where, primarily this is about student learning and skill development. And it's about putting them into a context where they have to respond to lots of feedback and have opportunities like tonight where they're presenting work publicly. And hopefully some of the ideas get out there and resonate and are useful to people and inspiring. But this is something that was done in 12 weeks, looking at it from kind of a particular perspective. It's not so don't understand it as, you know, this big sort of, oh, why don't we just do this? Because it's way more complicated than that in the real world, as you all know. So we really encourage the students to take a landscape kind of first approach to their thinking. And what I mean by that is really thinking about how we can structure growth and development by really carefully understanding the land and the landscape, both from an ecological perspective, but also from a cultural perspective. And in fact, I think the city is really doing this anyway in the secondary plan. When I look at it and I look at the framework plan for this larger area, it really is driven by landscape.
Janice?
Whether it's the natural heritage system or the cultural heritage landscape and the parks and open spaces and trails. So we were really trying to build on that. And you'll see tonight four projects that start to celebrate some of these ideas and explore them.
Yeah.
We looked at only a portion of the Clair-Maltby study area, so about 140 of the 400 or so hectares. And we centered on an area that we thought was really interesting, where the Marcolongo farm is located, Springfield Golf Course, Hall's Pond, a really interesting opportunity for ecological restoration, and parts of Gordon Street, which would be the main sort of mixed-use spine of the area. So I think I'll leave it there in terms of background. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of context. The structure for tonight, we've got 4 presentations. We had 15 or so projects in total, and it was really hard to sort of pick 4 because they were all really, really strong. But we've got 4 to go through. These were all group projects, and we've got one of the students from each group presenting the projects. And we're going to give them, I said between 6 and 8 minutes. So we're going to shoot for maybe 7 minutes. And then, so we'll hear from one for 7 minutes. And then we'd like to turn it over and have Mike and Dominique maybe just jump in with some commentary or feedback for about 5 minutes total. So maybe 2.5 minutes each. Then we'll go to the next project, 7 minutes, 5 minutes, and then we'll repeat that 4 times. And then, as Susan mentioned, if people have questions, please just put them in the chat, and we'll turn it over, and we'll spend 15 or so minutes at the end with just a general Q&A and discussion, and we'll try to moderate that. So I will keep time. I've already spent more time talking than I planned to. I apologize for that. So I'll turn it over. I'm going to share my screen, and I think Mackenzie, I think you're first, right? Ready to go? Okay, thanks everybody again for being here, and here we go.
Mackenzie has unmuted herself, did she?
Yes.
Okay.
Everyone can hear me, right? All right.
Okay, good. Take it away, Mackenzie, and just let me know when you want me to advance the slides, and I'll do that for you, okay?
Yes, perfect. Hi, everyone, and thank you for coming tonight. My name's Mackenzie, and I completed this project with group members Megan Collins, Michaela Vickery, and Stella Boycheva, who are all here listening today and should be able to jump in later for the question period. Our project is titled Sharing Connections. And then you can go ahead and change the slide. So the goals for our design included fostering economic exposure to small businesses and farmers, focusing on the implementation of mid-density housing, teaching the community about the importance and the function of the moraine, as well as encouraging creative learning. So all of these goals also umbrellaed under our main goal of encouraging community connection to not only each other, but as well as this location. Yes, next slide. Clair-Maltby has a significant cultural heritage. It has a unique moraine ecosystem, and it has the opportunity to become a gateway into the city of Guelph. So our design for Clair-Maltby incorporated the character of its rural past while maintaining the urban function that it required. It's intended to foster a close-knit neighborly sense of place or experience that small rural communities have through a network of community hubs. So as shown here, the central hub, the Cultural Heritage Hub, incorporates pre-existing heritage buildings on site into a new and revitalized community marketplace. This will be a flexible all-season space that will support farmers markets, community events, and other commercial use. The Art Hub includes a community arts education center with a large natural courtyard showcasing rotating public art and allowing for community events surrounding creative arts. The Ecology Hub is located within the community park and features unique and interactive landforms, which represent the form of the moraine and will enable creative, non-restrictive use and play. Pathways which immerse the visitors into the landscape and provide information on the local ecology will give the community members shared knowledge of the location that they live in, which will hopefully promote environmental discovery and stewardship. And then finally, the Family Hub, located within a strip of middle density housing, includes an accessible natural playground for families to get active and form relationships in a safe and shared space. All right, next slide. So in context, we considered the location of other farmers markets in the area, as well as other hub locations in Guelph, and began to think about how our site could lend to the overall character of Guelph while maintaining its own sense of place or its own character. We considered existing traffic on and surrounding our site to inform the design of Gordon Street. And we considered sun direction, wind patterns, and elevation on site in order to create optimal thermal conditions throughout natural courtyards and reduce the overall energy consumption of buildings. All right, next slide. So our master plan just shows the relationship between the built form and the landscape. So by including mainly mid to high density housing, we allowed for more space to be used as open green space. And by strategically placing bike and pedestrian pathways throughout the community, most of which being off main roads, we ensured that every resident has quick and safe transportation to various hubs and amenities throughout the neighborhood. All right, next slide. So this is just an example of some of our housing typologies. So this first one on top, which shows the sort of stacked buildings horizontally, is an example of our high density building typology. So obviously this is a bit of a radical building design for Guelph, but the idea here was to come up with a building that would work with the varied contours and landscape of Clair-Maltby, as well as to maximize the green space underneath and stray away from sort of typical urban form of Southern Ontario cities. And then below we have our mid-density housing, and our main goals for this design was to allow for sun patterns to decrease energy consumption and allow for optimal comfort in the shared space surrounding the residences, as well to encourage a safe and connected living space through a happy balance of private and shared space. This housing lends well to young families as it's accessible, affordable, and provides easy access to organic socialization, as well as social support for parents. All right, next. So then this is just a closer look at our main community hub and what it might look like. Again, this is acting as a flexible, programmable space. It can host a variety of gatherings, and can act to connect the community at a wider scale, not only to the rest of Guelph, but to the rest of Ontario and areas outside of Guelph. Okay, next slide. And then here, just at the image below, I wanted to address how we wanted to design Gordon Street. So we wanted it to become a complete street, which just allows for an extension of the public transportation, car traffic, as well as car parking, bike traffic, pedestrian traffic as well, with safety and a balance of permeable to non-permeable surfaces in mind. So Gordon Street currently receives a high amount of through traffic of people entering and leaving Guelph. So we hope that the many trails throughout the community would become the preferred method of transportation, offloading some of the traffic on Gordon Street. As well, that the addition of bus stops, the high activity of the street, and the business fronts would slow down traffic to create a safer street and potentially increase economic exposure. Okay, next. And then finally, this just is a closer look at the Ecology Hub and the Art Hub. So urban development in Southern Ontario often has this negative view from the public as the small communities that we know and love begin to change. So Clair-Maltby provides an opportunity to create a historically rich, active, and involved community, which inevitably would lead to happier and safer citizens. Clair-Maltby optimally could become a close-knit community, sharing connections within itself to the rest of Guelph and to the rest of Ontario. Thank you for listening, and I will now invite my team members to join for the questioning period.
Thanks, Mackenzie. That was great and right on time. You're right at 7 minutes. So I'm gonna start a new timer for 5 minutes or so to keep us on track here, and invite Councillor Dominique O'Rourke and MPP Mike Schreiner to sort of jump in if you have any sort of initial feedback. Maybe we could go one after the other. I see Mike has unmuted, so why don't we start with Mike and we can alternate each time in terms of the order.
Great, and I appreciate that. So we're commenting, not asking questions, right?
Yeah, I think
right?
we can, I think
Okay,
commenting, because we've just got 5 minutes, and we'll do questions at the
No
end.
worries. So I was just gonna say, what I really love the design, and I like the connection to sort of a modern look, but respecting the heritage, both the heritage of the built buildings, but also the ecological heritage as well. And I like the fact that it's a very people-centered community being created, especially in an area that, you're right, currently is very car traffic heavy. You know, I travel that road a fair amount, but transitioning that, I think, in a way that still allows mobility, but in a way that is it's complete and safe for everyone. I thought it was really important that you talked about energy conservation, not only in terms of the building materials, but the building layout and design, and incorporating your background in landscape architecture to design and place buildings in ways to maximize conservation and energy efficiency. And I really enjoyed the hubs, and the way the hubs all connected, and the way the hubs respected family, business, community, ecology, the arts, which I think really reflects the kind of community that Guelph is.
Thank you.
Well, those were some of my observations as well. I'm so impressed, Mackenzie, to you and your team. Really, congratulations. I loved the hubs. Sign me up for that farmers market, arts hub, school of art. That was just gorgeous. And I love that you were talking about the sense of place, its own character, but also within the city. So the very first time I ever went to a maquette and discussion for Clair-Maltby secondary plan, I said, you know, other parts of the city have Riverside Park or downtown or the university. And so what's the vision? What makes people from elsewhere in Guelph come to this part? Where's our distillery district, or where's that, you know, special thing for Clair-Maltby? And you came up with more than one, you and your team. So that is awesome. And I think it's important. Cities like Toronto, it's okay that there's, you know, downtown, and that there's the Danforth and Yonge, and, you know, the beaches. They're comfortable with these awesome things in different parts of the city. And I really think that's important for Clair-Maltby. So that is amazing. I loved your built form that was over the creek there. That was fantastic, very creative, and also not your regular urban built form. And how fantastic for the people who would live in there and have these magnificent views. So that was really impressive. You'll be happy to know that the vision for Gordon Street is to get to a complete street sooner rather than later, which will be great. And I was just really impressed with the orientation of the buildings for maximum sunlight, and that you really gave a lot of thought to that. So overall, so impressed. I know my colleague Mike Salisbury's on, and he's actually a landscape architect. So maybe we can, you know, take turns, because he may have some more erudite things to say. But overall, wow, just the presentation was spectacular. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you both for that excellent commentary and feedback. And yeah, and Councillor Salisbury, who is a graduate of our program, and I don't know, I remember him because I think I was maybe in first or second year when Mike was graduating. So anyway, it's great to have you on the call, Mike. And if I don't know if you saw all of that presentation, but if you are interested in jumping in for the other ones, please feel free, as Dominique has offered. So I think we're doing well for time. So let's jump to the next presentation, and I will start my timer again. So next up we have Evelyn. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, are you ready to go, Evelyn?
Yep. Can you
All
hear
right.
me?
Yep. Take it away.
Awesome. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Evelyn Yang. I'm the representative of the CHEM and Keto team. I complete this project with Amanda Passero, Evan Wrigley, and James Lamb. So before jumping into the design, I would like to tell you a story first, a story of our site, Clair-Maltby. So it was a million years ago. There was basically nothing on Ontario Lobe but the Laurentide ice sheet. During the past million years, these ice sheets retreat and come back innumerable times. It worked as a shove, bringing the soil out from the ground and returning the soil back when it came back. And this process left many subtle berms and small pounds on the ground, which are called CHEM and Keto. And then when the time passed, the ice sheet melted on the Southern Ontario area. Plants and animals eventually arrived this place, turning this topography into a highly permeable surface. Rain and melting snow seep through the soil and percolate and store under the land. This process forms a groundwater-rich area, which is where we have right now, the Clair-Maltby. From here, you might ask why we should even care about a topography has existed for thousands of years. This is because Guelph is one of the largest cities in Canada, which relies on groundwater supplies for potable water. So the groundwater quantity and the quality are very important to Guelph's people's life. Can you turn to next slide, please? Yeah. So in consideration of Clair-Maltby landscape as the last green field within the municipal boundary of Guelph, our team found it imperative that we implore a landscape forward focus to the development of the site. But it doesn't mean we can't build anything on it. Our goal was to maintain a continuous open space system that prioritizes active transportation, equitable access to the landscape, and the integration of dense urban form that is respectful of the site's unique topography. However, this isn't an easy work. Next slide. Because the moraine topography is too subtle to notice, and you can't see groundwater on the surface, right? Therefore, a cultural learning landscape will be located near the wetland with a pink label on this plan. To pass the story to the next generation, to educate people to respect the agriculture chapter of the story of Marcolongo Farm. And 2 community parks, one is at the top, another is at the bottom, are located near each of the community with purple and dark blue label to meet the entertainment demands and also support the local biodiversity. And the main community park at the top along House Pond builds upon the previous landscape golf court and provide community access to the House Pond. While the other one at the bottom, called Paris-Galt Moraine Park, located at the southeast side, will be an open green field which protects the major water recharge area, the Hamaki Hills. And also a feature area, the Laurentide district with light blue label, will be located at the high point, which overview the Paris-Galt Moraine Park. High density residential would be mainly located along Gordon Street, and residential density will eventually getting lower when getting closer to the natural heritage area. Next slide. And high traffic will be mainly limited on the Gordon Street, and the median traffic road will make sure residents can access the community easily. All the buildings near the major road will have underground parking. And this design is not only provide enough parking space for the resident, but also a strategy to limit the hard surface on the ground, prevent earth subsidence, and maximum the water recharge to the ground. Also, at the left side, a bikeway away from the traffic across the site from west to east provide a great opportunity for daily entertainment which you can enjoy continuous landscape in this area. Next slide. More importantly, to protect the most important water recharge area at Clair-Maltby, which is the Homaki area, we designed a focus district which located at the boundary of Guelph to find a balance between development and environment. It is a special experimental district which has its unique housing type. Next slide. So to review the glacier story in a human scale, we designed 3 housing types to illustrate the formation process of moraine. The first one is called carve. They are high-rise apartment, which will be the largest building blocks on our site to mimic the massive glacier billions years ago. We designed them in a step-like structure, which mimics the process of glacier carving the ground in the past. And the second one called push. They're mid-rise apartment which were constructed following the contour lines. We designed a curved shape of the building to review the push and retrieve back and forth process of the glacier, showing how the glacier formed the Homaki Hills, and further making them as a transition to our third building type, which is called disperse and deposit. The third building type is a townhouse. We designed a feature roof for this kind of townhouse to mimic the wavy form of Homaki Hills. And we also want them to function as Homaki Hills. We were imagining turning the building itself as a large filter collected water on the rooftop and let the water filter through the support structure and refill into the ground. Native plants will be also planted across the site based on the topography types to improve the permeability at the Homaki Hills. Next slide. Yeah, this is the planting palette. And next slide, please. And not only the housing type, an urban plaza and a community activity area are proposed at the center of the district to create a sense of place to mimic melting glacier as well. It can be used for daily entertainment and event. And next slide.
Hi.
And another perspective shows a long
the
weaving.
meeting's over. Oh, Darth Vader.
I didn't say anything.
You didn't say anything.
That's my power.
This one. Is this one showing like black? Interesting. Maybe there's another frame in between.
Yeah, sorry, let me just see if I can
Yeah.
fix this, Evelyn, just a second here.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe you could just show me where you want me to go on this screen.
Yeah, so it's the last panel and
Down
the
here?
perspective 2. No, the perspective 2.
Up here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this one shows a long weaving pathway at the center which will function as the walkway in the summer and turn into an ice ring in the winter. So overall, our goal is to balance the high density residential while providing green space and maintain the site history. Thank you for listening. And
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Evelyn. That was great. Great job. All right, well, why don't we start this time with Dominique and or Mike Salisbury, if you'd like to sort of double team, and then we'll go to Mike Schreiner.
Thank you very much. I just want everyone to know I came to watch and listen and be entertained. And Dominique says, "Hey, would you like to comment?" Although I must admit, I found this presentation to be really exciting. The story of the landscape as articulated through urban form, and that was wonderful. I bet the tree nerd in me wanted to read the tree list that you that you skipped over real quick, but nobody else but you and I are going to be interested in that perhaps. But yeah, no, I think that was perhaps the thing that stood out to me the most. It also looked as if there was a wildlife crossing. Did I miss that?
Yes, there is.
Okay. Yeah, but you didn't mention anything about that. I didn't catch that. Either way, I noticed it and I thought, oh, that's really interesting as well. But those were the two things that really jumped out at me. I thought it was a spectacular presentation. And since I'm here to watch, I'm going to close my mouth.
Well, Dominique, if you wanted to, we've got let's say another minute if you wanted to jump in with anything, or we can turn it over.
I loved the buildings and the public space. I loved the carve and the curve. And I thought, wow, what an amazing space that would be if we could get more diversity in our built form, and how inspiring. And I love that it told the story. So everything was impressive. The buildings will be what I retain from this presentation. And the ice rink.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, another fantastic presentation. And I love history. I remember I got a master's in history, but oftentimes people don't talk about ecological history. And so I really love the way that you incorporated the history of the ecology into the design of the building. So it's fantastic. And as somebody who deeply believes in the importance of protecting water, the way you incorporated the master plan focused on how do you have permeable surfaces and how do you design it in a way to make sure that water is protected. And even the design of the buildings, especially your third building, just around how that helps support the whole recharge and the importance of water recharge in the design and in the community. And again, I think like the first presentation, a lot of focus on people and people-centered spaces. And I think those are the kinds of communities that people want to live in. And I think it's what reflects a lot of what I love about Guelph.
Thank you. Thank you all for that the great feedback. So let's keep this momentum going. And thanks again, Evelyn. And we'll go next to Shannon. Are you ready to go, Shannon?
Yep, I'm all good to go.
Okay.
And I'll just say it now, but it's great to see a lot of familiar names and faces in the crowd tonight. So thank you all again for coming out and listening. My name is Shannon Charters, and along with my fantastic teammates, Daisy Reed, Tegan Rainey, and Adam Douglas, we designed the master plan project called Living Life on Food Lane. So just to set the stage for everyone, our design community's intent strives to cultivate a more profound connection between people and food by introducing a farm-to-fork system of edible plantings for both residential and commercial use, all the while honoring and celebrating the Paris-Galt Moraine. We integrated agricultural practices into the community through a food ribbon that will flow through residential and commercial areas, connecting people, culture, and food. Through the story of food, we can reconnect the agricultural roots set out on the Marcolongo farm with ongoing food economy initiatives to innovate and inspire the creation of future communities. So the three big circles that you guys can see were the three big ideas that we explored in our design: food sovereignty, Guelph connectivity, and the Moraine character. Food sovereignty is represented by a central food hub on our master plan and urban agricultural practices. Guelph connectivity is represented by the community's physical connection to Gordon Street and the more conceptual connections to the city of Guelph as a whole. And the character of the Paris-Galt Moraine inspired the Agri-Lanes ribbon form, and its hummocky geological landscape is replicated in our marine greenhouse as a growing microclimate. And so these three big ideas inspired our site's programming and led us to design elements that focus on gardening, inclusivity, nature, connection, cultural heritage, and celebration. And next slide, please. So this slide here, revisits the context of the Clair-Maltby site within the larger scope of Guelph, and it highlights three other projects which were designed with food, farmers, and agriculture, or in other terms, agricultural urbanism, being the core and defining strength of their designs. These help to inspire the layout of our conceptual master plan on the next slide. One goal of our master plan was to preserve as much of the cultural heritage landscape from development as we could. And we did this by creating closely knit neighborhoods and by using the maintained parklands, which you can see in the lighter green color, as buffers between the heritage landscape and the new housing. The yellow colored Agri Lane connects the smaller neighborhoods together by acting as an urban pathway, while the thinner white lines that you see throughout our master plan represents the trail system that can be used by people, dog walkers, and cyclists. The Upper Park Garden and the Crater Garden, which you can see are two labels on our master plan, are two themed growing locations selected for their unique terrain, and we will be revisiting them a little bit later on tonight. And other notable destinations in our community include an elementary school, a recreation center for seniors, the Moraine Greenhouse, an ecological corridor, a multi-sports park, and a land bridge crossing over Gordon Street. Next slide, please. Here on this slide, we have our block plan and our land use plan, which really just goes into a more detailed breakdown of our master plan, whether you want to know the overall number of building units that we have, or whether it's dividing up our master plan into more specific zoning categories. Next slide. Here, our design analysis provides a further breakdown of our master plan to really highlight its Agri Lane, as you can see on the left, its built form, and its connection right along Gordon Street. The three other diagrams, the hydrology, parks and open space, and natural heritage, are all diagrams that provide a visual of the natural landscape that will remain intact after all the development is over. Next slide. And here we're just giving you a glimpse of our different housing typologies, as well as a diagram of our street network, which you can see on our right, with street names inspired by terrain characteristics of the moraine landscape, like Glacier Street or Esker Road. Next slide. And unlike the two presentations before me, our team focused more on the design of the Agri Lane. It's a food ribbon that cuts across our landscape, and it's a pedestrian-only street that runs through our master plan, and it provides a literal farm to fort connection by connecting the central food hub and the cultural heritage of the Marco Longo farm with the rest of our community. Its ribbon form was inspired directly by the character of the moraine, with its planting beds and its planting layout being directly taken from the existing topography lines found on site right now. And as you can see in the small little breakdown in the middle of your screen, that's how we divided up the breakdown of the Agri Lane. And just please note, those colors are for communication purposes only. It's just meant to easily distinguish between the individual elements. And onwards to the next slide. Section AA shows the division of the Agri Lane amongst cyclists, pedestrians, and planting beds. And on the right, you catch a glimpse of a perspective of where our Agri Lane meets the ecological corridor. Next slide. And coming back to our growing opportunities, like I said I would earlier, besides the Agri Lane, we have three other unique areas that provide growing opportunities for the public: the Moraine Greenhouse, the Crater Garden, and the Upper Park Garden. The Moraine Greenhouse, which is located in our central food hub, will mimic the moraine topography to create specific microclimates for growing food indoors, as you can see in the small diagram underneath on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, looking at the Crater Garden and the Upper Park Garden, those will all be outdoor gardens, and they will use existing terrain to determine where crops can be grown successfully on them. And onwards to our last slide, we have on your left a zoomed in version of our central food hub, which includes the Marco Longo Farm, the Moraine Greenhouse, an indoor farmers market, and an outdoor pop-up market. And on the right, our plaza section and our perspective both provide possibilities of what these spaces could be used during the warmer summer months. And going back all the way to the beginning, our team wanted to create a community centered around food sovereignty, Guelph connections, and the character of the Paris-Galt Moraine. And if by the end of this presentation tonight, you could envision yourself walking along the Agri Lane, eating your way through the landscape, then I would say my team has achieved what we set out to do to begin with. Thank you all for listening.
Thanks, Shannon. That was great. So I think this time we'll go to Mike Schreiner first.
Okay, Shannon, you succeeded. I kept imagining what it would be like to walk down that lane and have a fresh tomato or cucumber or whatever it was growing there. It was fantastic. And again, what a great connection to the local history of the Marcolongo farm, but also just Guelph as a foodie city. You know, Guelph, obviously because of the university and so many other reasons, is known as a food hub for Ontario, Canada, etc. And so to have the whole community designed around that, I think it was fantastic and really energizing. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, now I'll have two farmers markets that I'm going to need to go to every Saturday. And then I also really like the way that you connected the cultural heritage with your design, and particularly around the Marcolongo farm. I love the idea of the farm to fork hub and having it like right in front of you. And I can imagine people from all over wanting to move and live in this community so they can walk agri-food lane all the time. So yes, I could imagine myself walking that lane.
Thank you for that feedback, Mike. Do we want to do, Dominique, I see you unmuting yourself.
Sure. Well, I just wanted to say, I think the agricultural urbanism is an important future trend. As people, you know, we talk about this 15-minute city, we talk about walkable communities. We know that agricultural land is diminishing in the province. And so I think you brought forward some really creative ways to do that in a non-sort of industrial agriculture way. I thought that was beautiful. What an amazing gateway to the city that would be. Because as people come into Clair-Maltby, it really is important for us to try and retain those barns, to try and retain that gateway feel and who we are, and to not just build it out. So I loved it. I was really impressed with the discussion around microclimates and maximizing the use of those, and really just blown away. And I too would be wrestling Mike Schreiner for a tomato or a cucumber on that lane.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so let's go now to our final presentation. So last but not least, we have Gavin. I see Gavin's ready to go. I'll share my screen.
Yes, I'm here.
All right.
Okay.
Take it away, Gavin.
All right, so to Dominique and Mike's thought of hunger, this one's a little bit different. It's going to be on your roof, not so much as a laneway. But hi, my name's Gavin. This is our project, Harvest Meadows, an urban agricultural community. I completed this project with Sadie, Cara, and Steph. I'm not sure if any of them were here to make it with me tonight. But to get things started, it was a very interesting approach through this class to start off a project with your big ideas and your big assumptions, to get into it. And to give you a little bit of context, we had to really come up with something we wanted to integrate within the landscape in this specific parcel of land before we even started designing. So to run that through for our project, we chose an urban agricultural community. So creating complete communities through urban agriculture, implementing a circular food system and economy, providing accessible and affordable, healthy local food, integrating housing, agriculture, and employment, ensuring food is securable and accessible to the remainder of the community. That's just a little bit of regional context, but I think we've already done that. You can go to the next slide, Brendan. Oh, my apologies, I just touched on that. Next, we move into our site analysis. And for this piece, and because it's so special to Guelph being it's the last greenfield development for the city, it was very important that we pay close attention to how we analyze it through landscape character, historical context, areas of natural and cultural significance. But the one I want to talk to the most, you may be able to hit the next slide, Brendan, was our topographical and slope analysis. Just to give you a brief overview, the orange color is the highest landscape and the blue being the lowest. And because this is so central around the moraine system, you can see where a lot of the lower wetlands would be, and this would be significant for us to make design decisions on our roadways, where our buildings were placed, how tall they would be, paying close attention to preserving those unique views within the site and within the Marco Longo farm. And so you'll see this as we go throughout our process. So a brief overview of our master plan here. You can see 3 of our views that I'll touch on what they are. The first one being a focus on a community hub and somewhere to go, in the sense that we want people to stay. As we've all touched on, this idea of Clair-Maltby being a gateway for the city of Guelph, while we need people to stay there and be engaged in their community and engaged in the areas where they live in and potentially work in. So this idea of proposing a multi-commercial, well, not necessarily commercial, but more localized commercial, where people can live in apartment buildings, etc., and experience the food that could be potentially grown locally, as well as the unique landscape through trail systems, etc. 2 is a view of what we have proposed to preserve the barn on the Marco Longo farm, in addition to having the idea of another farmer's market and a greenhouse as a storefront where you can experience the food that we've grown on site. And the third one is a perspective there of what the proposed townhomes would look like, and I'll touch on that later as well. So our design intent through what you've seen so far, we wanted to increase populations, urban expansion, climate change, and farmland loss require innovative ways to provide local, healthy, and affordable food for the city of Guelph. As Guelph approaches the design of its last greenfield development, we have the opportunity to rethink the way we integrate housing, employment, and food systems. Our design of Clair-Maltby site focuses on a complete community through urban agriculture while still meeting density goals. The integration of housing with commercial greenhouses not only meets the food needs of the community, but also connects the agricultural history of the land in a way that provides industry and job opportunities unique to the area. It was important for us to respect the form of the moraine in the landscape, that it is becoming rare in Southern Ontario. When designing our community, we wanted to provide the amenities needed to support walkability, while positioning them within the landforms to preserve unique character, views, etc. So as I had mentioned, these unique green townhomes are on the southern part of what we have proposed. And these bridges here was something that we had much discussion about with professors and between our group members throughout our process. The proposal of these greenhouses would need seamless and very efficient connection to ground and within each other to actually function between, whether that's employees and just different areas of growth, depending on what vegetables. So these are actually bridged across from each other, vertically off the ground, and would be lifted in specific locations that would best suit the landform, so that we would not take away any soil, not destruct anything, and mitigate the impact upon construction, any sort of deal like that later down the road. So this housing diagram can kind of speak to what I was just talking about there. On the left side, you can see how the 2 town rows would have a central focus and sidewalk on either side through the middle, and then that green section with the dotted line going down would be a bridge network across to proposed greenhouses. On the right is a more appeasing visual to the road network and proposed townhomes. And I think you can hit the next slide, Brenda. And then as our proposed site, our open space network here idolizes public space, semi-private, natural heritage, private space, and pollinator meadows. So an interesting thing that had arose from our idea to be mindful of the landform and not propose a significant amount of impact was that there was this large amount of naturalized space that we have left to design. The pollinator meadows would in turn enhance and preserve these unique views on the Marco Longo farm, cultural heritage, and would be significant for people to view from their homes, their backyards, their trail systems, and integrate it into the community network. On the right side, you can see a typical street section. Oh, sorry, Brandon. just the sidewalk, regular tree plantings, and then the mixed use section elevation would be more or less the commercialized or built area that would house this idea of stay and integration of new jobs within the site. That's just a small section elevation in comparison. Our block diagram orchestrates where you can see the townhomes on the southern side, your commercial use, your integrated community use, and your gateway. Our housing typologies are quite a large range, as I had spoken about different commercial frontages, mixed uses and medium densities. These kind of orchestrate how they would facilitate on a level basis. They're high rise in certain areas, and this was due to accompanying and preserving views in areas that we thought would be more significant. This was also to meet density goals for our project and house the numbers that Clair-Maltby had proposed for being the last extension on Guelph.
I think that's the last slide, Kevin.
And I think that is, yes, I just had one more note here. So as a wrap, I wanted to give you a cool little blurb on who we use as our precedent. There's a company called Lufa Farms and out of Quebec City who is we have used as a model, and in regards to that, their smallest operation that is out of Montreal is about, I believe, 28,000 square meters of space, employs 200 people, and produces roughly 25,000 pounds of produce each week. Based on this, out of a total of 84,000 square meters we have proposed in our harvest meadow, we could provide up to 600 jobs and produce 75,000 pounds of local produce on a weekly basis. Wow. And based on Canadian vegetable consumption statistics, this is enough to provide more than 50,000 people with local grown food each year and have plenty to walk up to your roof and grab a cucumber on a daily basis for anyone in Guelph. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed listening to our presentation on Harvest Meadows.
Thanks, Gavin. That was great, and those statistics at the end were remarkable. I'm glad you took the time to share those. Okay, so this is our last round of feedback, and then we'll open it up to, I guess, any sort of general questions or comments from the audience. So before we jump in, maybe I'll just remind people that if you do have a question, now would be a good time to sort of maybe in the chat indicate that you have a question or type your question in, and then we'll try to get to you afterward. But first, let's spend another 5 minutes with Mike and Dominique, and Mike. Who'd like to go first this time?
We'll head off.
I'm good to go. Doesn't matter. So, so finally, somebody has a development. They name it something that they're creating, not destroying. So I can't tell you how many times you hear something like Harvest Meadows, and it used to be a Harvest Meadow. And so I thought it was so fantastic that you incorporated pollinator habitat. You talked about wetland preservation. You connected everything to making sure, once again, that you were respecting the topology of the ecology of the area. You connected it to the cultural heritage of the Marcolongo farm. I love the idea of being able to grow food and to connect it with the community hubs you talked about and the trail system walking through the neighborhood. And as you were ending your presentation, I thought to myself that, you know, hopefully we're going to avoid the climate crisis. But if we don't avoid the worst of it, Clair-Maltby is where somebody would want to live, because talk about a resilient community to be able to grow that much food, have it connected to where you live, and be living somewhere where the design of the community is all about making sure that we respect the ecology of the place and the importance of water recharge and protection once again. So I'd say great work to all four. I'm glad I don't have to decide which one is the winner, because they're all fantastic.
Yeah, it's definitely not a competition. They're all really interesting. I grew up on Valley Ridge Trail, Mike, so I totally know what you mean about naming after the landscape that came before. I think Mike Salisbury is ready to go.
Absolutely. You know, when I saw those greenhouses on top of the architecture, I thought, what a really simple solution that's brilliant. Am I correct in saying that you've modeled that after an existing architectural offering, or was I correct on that?
Yes, they're essentially more industrialized, and we wanted to provide something or come up with something ourselves that would be more localized in the sense that it would be on top of where a community would live. Like I said, there is a few commercialized areas that we provided as a larger hub for the community, or I guess you could say the working population in the south end of Guelph, that we would probably have larger operations on, just being that they would be a bigger footprint building. But we really did want to integrate it into areas where, you know, people would be living their home life as well.
I think it's brilliant. You probably have not familiar with the name Walter Kalm, but you made him really proud. He was my advisor on my thesis, and he, you know, back at the time when green roofs were a big deal, you know, it's like, whoa, we're going to plant stuff on a roof, and this just takes it to a whole new level. I thought that was really ingenious, and you may or may not be aware that there was some conversation around the location of parkland in the Clair-Maltby area. But I really liked your solution and the way that it interfaced with Gordon, and sort of that, like, it's always been one of those things when I looked at Clair-Maltby going, where's the center, and how does that relate to the green space? And I found on your master plan there, it really looked to me like those were integrated together by moving that parkland into the low areas of low topography. So anyway, those were a couple things I was really excited by, and I'll echo what was said earlier, is that these were all fantastic. And I mentioned to Dominique, I sent her a text. I said, you know, what we really need to do is open our planning exercises with something like this instead of having it at the end, you know, so that we can get the benefit of these really novel ideas that, you know, some can be implemented, right? And so this was great. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you, Mike. Dominique, I don't know if you wanted to add anything, or if you're good to leave it. Yeah, perfect. Right on time. I don't know if you heard my timer just went off. Perfect. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Gavin, for that presentation. Thanks to all the students. I'm wondering, Susan, have we got any questions in the chat? I haven't really been monitoring.
I don't see any questions, but a lot of people are now hungry. That's what they said. And there's many comments for the students about the amazing presentations. Great work, good ideas. So a lot of the people have commented on that, but I didn't see any questions. So if anyone would like to ask a question and unmute themselves and ask the students, or Brendan or Mike or Dominique, or even Mike Schreiner, even though he's only here relaxing. Mike Salisbury, sorry.
And I'll just mention that quite a few of the other students on these teams are also here listening in, and I think would be happy to field questions as well, to take our presenters off the hot seat if they so choose.
Mike?
I'm just gonna take myself off mute. I didn't know how you wanted us to. So I have a question, but I want to preface with a comment. So when I introduced the Paris-Galt Moraine Conservation Act, in consultation with people like Mike Marlongo, and I think I saw Hugh Whiteley on this call at one point, and others, the dream of that act was to protect the Paris-Galt Moraine in a way that didn't say you couldn't do any development. And so I think what was so inspiring by all, I didn't want to say this to any one, so I'll group it to all the presentations, was the way your vision of how we can build housing for people and build community space and commercial space in a way that it protects the integrity of the moraine. And so I'm just wondering, and this is a question for any of the groups or anybody who didn't present, is do you feel like the city can accomplish its sort of population targets for the Clair-Maltby area in a way that protects the integrity of the moraine, both as a water recharge and filtration area to protect our drinking water, but also as an area that, you know, is important for flood protection and prevention, which is an important issue as well. And sort of your confidence in being able to meet, I guess, the population targets for the area while maintaining the ecological integrity of the moraine itself.
Do any of the students want to jump in on that question?
I would jump in.
Yeah, go ahead, Amanda.
So I would say that it's possible. I think truly it's just changing our perspective to what we are used to and what we know. I think so traditionally that these developments we've been doing lately that we see all the time are single lot family homes. So trying to almost shift that perspective of knowing that we can build things differently and that we can look at the landscape first. Like you said, so many of these developments are named after things that we kind of bulldoze over. But I definitely do think that there's a lot of possibility, and you've seen all the varieties of building forms that just these 4 teams have come up with, let alone just 16 different projects. So I think we just need to, it's almost like changing what our perspective of what we know. And then secondly, I think when we do change that perspective, like how do we make high density livable for families? Like how do we not, like we need to simply, we can't just not acknowledge that sticking all families in a condo isn't suitable for everyone. So how do we make the actual condo livable? And as a landscape architect, I can't fully speak to that, but you know, we had some good ideas of what that might look like. I think it's, yeah, I think the first thing though is realizing that we can do a lot in a small space and that things don't need to sprawl. And that also, I know our team, and I think most teams had discussed, like, I think we think of nature and conservation as something that needs to be separate. And I know with Brendan, we had this conversation a lot during our design phase, but we need to build as if like we're building to be a part of the natural environment, not separate from, and not creating purposeful borders between urban and nature. These things can be integrated, whether it's a green roof or whether we're ensuring that all surfaces are permeable and we're managing stormwater and we have like wildlife crossings and microhabitats, microclimates throughout the entire community where humans are living, you know, and like, can we build for things to flood? I know we looked at a few projects that were precedents that the project, like the public spaces were actually flooding at points. And then at that point, it wasn't serving maybe as a plaza, it was like more of an ecological service. But then at other points, it was a plaza. Like, it is money, but I think we always say it's so much money, but at the end of the day, like the cost of not doing these things is going to be more. So I think it's first and foremost a perspective change, and then having things like these in conversations and meetings to kind of come up with new ideas of what communities can look like during this time.
I think that was a great answer, Amanda, and a really good question, and kind of like the big question. The one thing I would just quickly add, and then I see that Adam's got his hand up, just to build on what Amanda's saying. I mean, I know that one of the themes that we explored quite a bit in the studio was this, and Amanda touched on this idea of stewardship and this idea of the relationship between people and communities and the land. And it's not just about numbers, you know, it's not just about density, it's not just about you know, green infrastructure. It's about building into community a culture of stewardship and a you know, and I think that needs to be layered into every aspect of how we think about communities. And I know a lot of the students thought about, well, maybe these aren't just regular schools, maybe these are schools that have a very specific curriculum that's based on going out into the natural heritage system and doing science and doing monitoring and actually proposing interventions and just building this kind of cultural relationship to this land that makes it second nature to do the right things and to take care of things. So I think we really all explored that in this studio. And the way I would suggest maybe we think about that is this idea of, we talk about cultural landscapes as things, as sort of artifacts from the past that we protect. And that's really important, but we're also making new cultural landscapes all the time. And as landscape architects, we're being tasked with designing habitats for humans and for communities and for all non-human life as well. And there's a culture that comes from that based on our values. And so I think we were all trying to explore how, with all of the pieces, all the parts, we're actually creating a new type of culture, which I think is hard to do, but critical to solving that puzzle. So why don't we go to Adam and then Mike Salisbury?
Well, thanks for letting me ask a question, and thanks to all the teams for those great design ideas. My question kind of builds on Mike's, but it's kind of more broad. Like, I guess it's a process question. It's just, when I'm thinking about Clair-Maltby, I'm thinking about how the 400 hectares are separated by dozens of different landowners, dozens of competing interests, provincial regulations, municipal regulations. How did the students and the various groups, was it a matter of sort of carte blanche, here's 400 acres, do what thou wilt, or, I guess what were the parameters of the exercise?
That might be a good one for me to tackle. That's a great question, Adam. We were trying to strike a balance between providing constraints and real world on the ground realities, but not making it too constraining that we couldn't develop kind of slightly out of left field concepts. So in terms of the constraints, we set certain things like density targets, and we said the natural heritage system is kind of like, you can't reduce it. You might think about new ways to engage with it and sort of rethink the degree to which it might be actually accessible in certain ways. But in terms of property ownership, other than the cultural heritage landscape, we sort of assumed that it all kind of gets, purchased, and we can think about it comprehensively. Gordon Street, we weren't going to move it. We were going to keep that, as a sort of spine. So I don't know if that answers the question, but we were trying to sort of balance these things, but also not get bogged down, in the nitty gritty that, the actual team has to deal with, where we're trying to create space to ask different types of questions that you often don't get to in the real world. Mike Salisbury?
Thank you very much. I'm going to approach it from a slightly different perspective. One of the things that a lot of these presentations were really strong on was site analysis and telling the story, whether it's an ancient story of geology or a more recent story of food production. However, we've all just been through or going through one of the most profound changes in the history of our planet. And people have been forced to do things differently. And now people are beginning to adapt to that. People are beginning to adapt to not necessarily a pandemic lifestyle, but what will ultimately be a post-pandemic lifestyle. Things will be different. So I'm wondering if each of the groups could comment on what they think in their project picked up on that. And by the way, no fault if you didn't, because this is recent news. But how did those designs reflect what they believe will be the cultural differences that will drive urban form? And if that wasn't really within the scope of their work, perhaps what they think the changes that would be on the table going forward, what would they consider to be some of the big anthropological, societal, behavioral differences that will drive changes in urban form?
Great question, Mike. Do any of the students want to jump in and share any thoughts on that one? I see lots of pondering.
I have one kind of point to talk to. I think it's the sense that currently I work for the city of Toronto in parks, and people are desperate to be outside right now. And even with everything locked down, we still have a very high volume of people throughout the afternoon portion of our shift, being that I work the mornings and maintain the parks when they're not there. But in respect to Clair-Maltby and looking at all of our designs and how careful we were to mitigate impact to areas that we thought were less sensitive, and sustain and maintain and preserve the areas we thought were of doing so, of worthy of keeping intact and as natural as possible. And I think in a lot of ours, if you look at the formation, there is a large portion of open space. And I think the biggest thing to change is, like Amanda said, how we design to be a part of that and to have access to that consistently. A lot of time, mental health wise, I know going through online school, being outdoors was, a total relief for people. I think that's the only really point I can speak to anthropologically or psychologically is that everyone needs that break. Building form wise, I think a lot of things could change, but they could also remain the same in the sense that they need to be more dense, I guess, with a growing population. But at the same time, I'm not sure how you accommodate safe access to that if COVID measures or post-pandemic measures are, still highly intact months or years from now. So.
And also just bouncing off what Gavin said, all of our designs had a very evident connection to nature, whether it was more trail systems outdoors or even like inside the actual architecture, you were connected through greenhouses and all that. So looking forward to the future, you could imagine that there's been more direct connections to nature, whether indoors or outdoors, and how can we facilitate that? Because as Gavin spoke to, there's a huge need for that now. We've never seen anything like that before, because as soon as everyone's stuck at home, they can only stay at home for so long before they're itching to get outside in one way or another. So we could imagine that moving forward, we might be seeing more connections in different shapes and forms that you've kind of seen here tonight.
Amanda.
Yeah, and once again, like just building, I think a big word is access going forward. This year has been like a social, cultural, economic reckoning for a lot of us. And I think we're realizing who we've been centering, like who our communities have centered, who we have left out of the picture when we're building our communities. I know now that how impossible it feels for many people to even enter the housing market. I know that there's a lot of politics and social housing issues, like how do we have affordable housing? I know Brendan even said it's not necessarily about density, but how do we create community for everyone and allow access for everyone? So maybe how can we make these places more affordable and diverse, and then once again allow people to have access to like nature and spaces outdoors and amenities and things that they need in their community, and like how do we build spaces that can accommodate a variety of populations within the same community. So I think that's a big question we have to be asking ourselves going forward, if we're building for just one type of person, one type of community, or if we're building for many people.
I think one other dimension to that question that I know a lot of the student teams grappled with was trying to think about, and this is always the case, I think, when you're doing planning work that's decades into the future, like what is the economy going to be like? And given what we've just experienced and are experiencing, and all of the disruption, and particularly with retail and supply chains and all this kind of stuff, I know that a lot of the groups were thinking also about maybe we're going to be spending a lot more time, maybe we're going to be living and working a lot more in the same places, and obviously the pandemic things will, who knows what's going to happen right afterward, but some of these patterns may linger as well. And so I know that a lot of the students were thinking about what does it mean to actually have maybe more light industry integrated into a community, and what are sort of new types of local economic systems that might start to create new lifestyles and new types of built form and community space. So I think that there was a kind of local economic dimension to all of this too, Mike, that was part of the thinking. And I know Shirley and I were trying to encourage the students to really run with that. And it would have been great to have integrated this with like a business, a business class or something, and really try to cross-pollinate some of these ideas, because it's pretty hard to forecast that stuff, but pretty a big part of the question, I think.
Brendan, we do have one question in the chat that kind of relates to that. How do we integrate these amazing ideas and thought-provoking new ways of living with the economic mindset of earning short-term profits? So here's the real world.
I want to hear what the students think about that. It's a bit of a cop-out, but I wonder if any of the students have any thoughts about how to actually agitate and get people to think longer term about some of these things. Any insights or thoughts? Or any of our panelists who hold certain levers to power.
That's the challenge of my political life, to be honest with you, given the kind of politics I do. So I would say some of the comments that Amanda has made in previous answers starts to get at this question. I think we have to figure out ways that we can build people-centered communities, 15-minute communities. I think Dominique had mentioned that earlier. How do we design communities that provide high quality of life, that are affordable, inclusive, focused on people and nature, and at the same time are affordable? Because there's this false narrative that's happening right now, and it happens all too often in the building I'm sitting in right now, that the only way that you can create affordability is to build on more green space. And the green space development is the only way we're going to address the housing affordability crisis. And I would argue that maybe in the short term, I even doubt it in the short term, but in the long term, it's going to be far more expensive. And so the designs that the students put forward today, I think if done properly, can actually create more short-term affordability and absolutely more long-term affordability. The question is, and this is the hard one, is finding people who are willing to build those kinds of developments in ways that are designed to be profitable, but not to maximize profit, if that makes sense. And I think, and just one final comment, I think it's why we need provincial policies like the provincial policy statement. That's why the city needs to have a strong official plan and a plan for Clair-Maltby, because the rules of the game have to be set up in a way where that type of development can be profitable, but the design parameters and the rules and regulations don't allow for profit maximization to lead to the long-term destruction that is implied in that question.
Okay, Brendan, we're coming to the end of our time. Would you like to make a summary comment for everyone?
Well, I can do that. I did see Dominique's hand just pop up, but
okay.
I don't know if she's good. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Well, so I'll try to wrap up quickly. Susan, thank you for being our a marshal. It was great.
That was my Marshall moment. Yes.
That was your Marshall moment. Well, so all I will say, just to wrap up, is just a bunch of really big thank yous. So thank you so much to our sort of special esteemed panel. Mike Schreiner, it's amazing to have you participate and engage with the students, and Dominique, same, and nice to meet you. And Mike Salisbury, is a nice surprise to have you here too. And I see lots of familiar names on the call, colleagues at the school and lots of students. Thank you for turning out and supporting your colleagues. To the 4 students who presented, I'm so, we're just so proud. Words are hard to find. I mean, it is such a great way to wrap the semester. We've just kind of, in the last month or so, wrapped the year and are sort of pivoting into the summer, and you were all going off into the real world, and I think I saw a comment in here from Mike Marcolongo about how exciting it is to know that people like you are going to be out there. You're the next generation going out and influencing the way we do this work and the conversations we have. So it's an honor to get to work with all of you, and Shirley, to my co-instructor, thank you as well for all of the stuff that went in behind the scenes to make this happen. So thanks to everybody. Congratulations to the students. Thanks so much for joining us, and hopefully we can do more of this in the future.
And just thank you for thanking everybody. Saved me thanking them. And just a final thanks to the Protect Our Moraine group for organizing this evening, and to you, Brendan, for your work. The vision and the innovation, it was just really, really amazing. And so we hope to see changes immediately and all these new things incorporated when City Council makes its decision. So please sign up for another session in the 2Rivers Festival. I'd like to thank everybody on behalf of 2Rivers. Thanks, Brendan. Thanks to students. Thanks to the panel. It was a great evening. And go well into nature, everybody. Take care of our rivers. Bye.